Can you believe it? I mean, seriously, it's October 1st. I know. It's also 8:36 in the morning. How you doing? It is kind of cool here in western Iowa in low 40s this morning. I think we might be up to 44 right now. Sun's been up for maybe an hour or so. So starting to warm up, but today's high is only in the 60s. Oh, it's nice, but there's some other problem areas across the country, namely the Southwest. It is hot in western Arizona, also along the Colorado River and into California. We just have excessive heat warnings here. So enough is enough, but too much is definitely sufficient. Heat advisories for California in the orange, and then the purple is your excessive heat warnings. And then you get up into Oregon, that's a red flag warning along the California-Oregon border there. Then up into Montana, Idaho, parts of Wyoming, even South Dakota. Freeze warning, so be warned. There's going to be freezing temperatures here and there. And then in that other pink, it's a red flag warning. So we still have some gusty winds for the Dakotas into Nebraska and Wyoming. Windy in Wyoming? How odd. I know. And so be really careful here. You know, it's a high fire danger. So that's the difference between, say, a wind advisory and a red flag warning. The wind gusts might be about the same, but the red flag warning throws in that fire danger. So be careful if you're playing with matches. If you smoke, keep your butt in the car. I mean, just do that anyway. All right, fog right now, Indiana, Tennessee. River flooding still a problem up and down the East Coast as we're still recovering from Hurricane Helene. What a disaster, especially for Western North Carolina. Hopefully those folks can get the help that they need, but it is bad. All right, here we go with our weather spotlight. My old stomping grounds, 15 years. I lived in Tucson, Arizona, and that's where we go today. This is from the weather office in Tucson. They made this little infographic this morning at 4:07 a.m. Mountain Standard Time. And these are the highs around the area. So 110 Phoenix, 112 Gila Bend on Interstate 8, Ajo 106, 102 for Green Valley. I always go, ho, 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 Green Valley. 105 for Tucson. Now you get further south and east, that's where the mountains are. So little elevation there for Nogales at 99. Sierra Vista elevation 94. Douglas, same. So that's kind of how it looks around Tucson. Oh, Hannigan Meadow. There's a ski area there. 66 today, but looking for some snow someday up there as the seasons change. Tropics, because we have some stuff to talk about. Remember how I was looking at the GFS and we looked ahead in time and the GFS indicated a possible tornado by the end of this week? It's not going to happen, so don't worry about that. However, we have tropical development, 40 to 60% chance here, and they're putting it at 40%. That orange X in the Caribbean, and could be moving into the Gulf we'll see if it develops into a tropical system. When I show you the GFS, it does have a tropical system into Florida next week. So we'll see. Meanwhile, out in the middle of the Atlantic, there's Tropical Storm Kirk, to boldly go where no tropical storm has gone before, and a 90% chance of development with the red X out there, but not bothering anybody at this point. Now, there's another tropical system. I should have pulled up the map for that. On the Pacific side, where John is gone, but there's two systems there that look like they're very likely to develop. And one of those could be moving into Arizona, not as a hurricane, but that moisture. And when that happens, that means a lot of rain for them. So we'll show you that too when we get to the GFS model. But just be aware, we could see tropical development in the Caribbean, into the Gulf, later, in, say, the weekend into next week, and maybe another tropical system, perhaps a hurricane into Florida by next week. We will definitely be watching it. That's what we do. All right, we've got a cold front. Get your red hot cold front here. And it's already through Iowa. That's why today's high is only in the 60s, which is where they should be this time of year, instead of the mid upper 80s. I think Omaha hit 90 yesterday. It's obnoxious. The heat's coming back too. But anyway, ahead of that front in the Midwest, we see scattered showers, Great Lakes too, down to the mid-Atlantic. A little bit of maybe some thunderstorms there in Arizona for a little bit of relief from the heat. In Washington State, it's rain and snow, perhaps, in the Cascades. And there you see your critical fire danger, North Dakota into Montana. Here's how those temperatures look. This is departure from average. Iowa right at average in the upper 60s today. This is where we should be for fall, early fall. And really the eastern half of the country, pretty close to average, except for, say, east half of Texas into Arkansas, maybe 10, 11 degrees above average. The west is hot pretty much everywhere, or, compared to average. So that's why we have those excessive heat warnings, for example, for Arizona, because those temperatures are going to be 99 Tucson, although we saw on our map 105. Here's why. So when I pull this map, this is for 21Z. If you look up in the upper left-hand corner, Tuesday, October 1st, 21Z. So this time of year, you subtract 5, that's 16. Subtract 12, that's 4 o'clock in the afternoon Central Time. So this is temperatures 5 o'clock Eastern, 2 o'clock Pacific. So these are near the highs for the Central and Eastern time zone, but not quite the highs for the West. So this is kind of the best compromise map. So these are near the highs. So probably in the low 100s for Central California, for example. Tucson, as we saw, 105 today. And Phoenix, 110. So it will be hot, 90s for East Texas at least, into Arkansas, where we saw that, where we saw this. The temperature anomalies above average, and they sure are. Meanwhile, in the plains, it's 70s. And then in the upper Midwest, it's 60s. Great Lakes, 60s, 50s. In Pennsylvania, very nice. Lows tomorrow morning. And again, same thing. This is 12Z. Subtract 5, 7 o'clock Central, 8 o'clock Eastern, 5 o'clock Pacific temperatures. 50s in the Pacific Northwest. Widespread here, some 40s too. And then you get down into the desert Southwest, starting in the 80s. Temperatures near 60 for Lubbock and lots of 60s in Texas, but 70s along the Gulf Coast. A lot of 50s and 40s for the Midwest to start the day tomorrow. Great Lakes 2 and Northeast 2 on the 40s. Here's your surface for tomorrow. Cold front making further eastward progress and a little bit further south, cooling things off a little bit, knocking things back down to average for some. But ahead of that, we see rain showers, moving into the eastern Great Lakes, into the eastern part of the country, and for the mid-Atlantic, not quite to the ocean yet. Scattered showers, Florida, South Texas, critical fire danger, Wyoming, and a little bit of snow for the Cascades in Washington. Anomaly temperatures, departures from average tomorrow. We see, again, temperatures getting knocked down to average with that front into the Great Lakes, into the Midwest, into, say, Tennessee, Arkansas, where it's so hot today, cooling off tomorrow. But further behind the front, warming right back up in the Central Plains, we're back to 20 degrees above average for, say, Nebraska. Yikes. Meanwhile, California stays hot. Slightly cooler for Arizona, single digits above average, and the Pacific Northwest below average a little bit, and that gets more pronounced, say, along the Canadian border in Montana, and then, of course, into Canada, above average temperatures. Here's how those highs translate. And so in Canada, you have 40s, 50s, even 30s for highs, and then, down into Montana, 50s for highs, which is still fall-like. And that's the case along the Canadian border. And for the Northeast, that's where we see our 50s. But then quickly warming up as you head south. So 80s, South Dakota, 90s, Nebraska, Kansas, 80s to near 90. Oklahoma, 80s, 90s. Texas, 80s for the southeast. But a little cooler for the Midwest, transitioning back to 70s as you get into Illinois, Indiana, Kentucky, Ohio, even Tennessee. And the Great Lakes, some 60s scattered in there as well. Your surface for Thursday, another front coming down the northern plains, so that's nice. And will it make it to my house in western Iowa? It's going to be close. Meanwhile, scattered showers along the Gulf Coast, but really quiet otherwise on Thursday. Temperature departure from normal, that cold front in the northern plains, keeping things around average. Ahead of the front, well above average, 15 to 20 degrees above average. Kansas, Missouri, most of Iowa, into Illinois. Don't be left out. Oklahoma into Texas on the warm side. And then fading into normal temperatures as you head towards the East Coast. And there's a little pocket there along the Texas Gulf Coast of like 9 degrees below average for Mobile, Alabama. All right. And still on the warm side for California. Can't catch a break here. In fact, highs in California, again, these are 2 o'clock in the afternoon, so a little warmer than this. 104 Bakersfield and Fresno, probably be 106 by the time the day's over, maybe 100 for Sacramento, even though this map has 97. So, and then these are the highs for the Central Plains, most likely mid-90s. And then, but cooler up towards the Canadian border. We have a lot of 50s up there, North Dakota and Montana. And then, the Midwest looks pretty good, mid to upper 70s, say Indiana, Ohio, and then some 60s as you head into the Northeast. All right, here's kind of the main event, I think. I don't know. You tell me in the comments. I would love that. Some feedback is always good. So here's what's going on right now. And we do have some rain here in the Delmarva, Delaware, Maryland, and Arva. Okay, so Virginia. And a little bit here for the Keystone State too. And then this is a front. So you can see here, would be our front that's moving. It's more here. And some showers along that where there's enough moisture in Canada, and this 540 line, again, kind of the demarcation between rain and snow. It's dry, so we don't see that, but it kind of tells me that's where the kind of the coldest air is. And so just barely dipping down into Minnesota and then into Michigan, but moving back into Canada as we go through time here. And we see that front making eastward progress. With those showers moving into Pennsylvania and New York State and fading out. A little bit of activity for the Northwest, but mainly up in Canada. Now, where are we now? We're Thursday here, 15Z. So Thursday morning, we're seeing a little bit more activity in the Gulf. So later this week, remember this was going to be our hurricane. Well, that's not happening. But we do see some rain showers and probably some pretty heavy rain. For parts of Louisiana into Mississippi, Alabama, and Florida. And that kind of fizzles out on Friday, although it's still there. So increased moisture for the Gulf Coast Friday, moving into the weekend. Wind returns here. Look how windy for the Dakotas. This is Saturday, Friday at midnight-ish, overnight, early morning Saturday. Some rain up here. And then as we go, this low up here in Canada really generating some wind here for the upper Midwest and into the northern plains and that secondary front, but not a lot of cold air. And then meanwhile, some pretty heavy rain here for Houston. Now we're getting, towards next weekend, so we're a few days out here. So less certainty on the exact forecast, but these are the trends. But no hurricane this weekend, so that's the good news. Bad news is maybe next week. So this low, again, is going to, bring in some heavier showers, looks like for Florida, but that is not tropical strength. But watch this. See this little guy right here? It's tiny, but it's mighty. And this gets us into Tuesday. So a week from today, we could have a tropical system in the Gulf, tropical storm or hurricane. And looks like right now, this forecast, this run of the GFS has a possible hurricane moving into Florida by Tuesday late night, Wednesday early morning, going, looks like right through Orlando. And then we'll emerge on the other side near Jacksonville, and then perhaps one of those that re-strengthens in the Gulf Stream here off the Carolinas. So we'll watch that. Now watch this. Here's another hurricane on the Pacific side. And let's see, when I hover over this, it moves. Okay, we're good. So this is Wednesday now, Wednesday afternoon. So this tropical system, if this comes exactly true, remember, we don't know yet, but this is an indication maybe. So if this forecast comes true, then we'll have this hurricane off the Baja California coast moving into the Gulf of California. This takes us to Saturday. So this is a week from Saturday. So this is October 12th. So way out there. But we'll just keep an eye on this, because sometimes what happens is we have these tropical systems move into the Gulf of California, stay fairly strong. And I think, how many years ago was that? I was still living in Arizona when I was in Tucson still. So that would have been 6 years ago, maybe something. We had a tropical storm. It was still tropical storm strength when it crossed the Arizona border. I don't know that this will do that. But the main thing with these systems, and depending on where they go, is the very heavy rainfall. And of course, the desert has that caliche right underneath the sand. And so it just runs off. It doesn't really soak in. I mean, a little bit, but not like the rest of the country. So it just runs off, causes massive flooding problems. So that's going to be something to watch a week from this weekend. So that's way out in the future. So, we'll keep an eye on both of those things. Now, just to give you an idea on how fickle these long range forecasts can be, if you watched yesterday, remember I showed you a snowstorm that was forming here around the 15th and dropping into the Rockies. Well, it's not there anymore. So this run of the GFS doesn't have a snowstorm in the Rockies on the 15th or the 16th. It's keeping everything, the cold air and everything, well north, although there will be a cold front according to this run, but not nearly as strong, not nearly as cold, and not a snowstorm for the United States. So that's why we have huge grains of salt when we go towards the end of these runs. And that's why we look for consistency in the runs before we bite too hard on a forecast. So just keep in mind, perhaps a week from today, a hurricane or a tropical system approaching Florida. And then a week from this weekend, another possible hurricane moving up Baja California towards Arizona with a lot of moisture for the desert Southwest. So that's what we'll be watching. And of course, we'll keep you posted. Now, this upcoming weekend, here's what the temperature anomalies look like. Departure from average, and that heat is back. Central Plains, 20, 30 degrees above average again. Just crazy. At church, we have a trunk or treat event at one of our, it's not a state park, but it's a park. It's really beautiful. And so, kids come and we're making s'mores for them and that sort of thing. And it's going to be hot. Last year it was a cold rain. This year it's going to be t-shirts and shorts because it's going to be very warm in Iowa and Nebraska and Kansas and Missouri. You get the idea. So the plains on the hot side, really the whole country above average except for Houston and Florida. And again, we're watching for possibly some tropical moisture showers this weekend along the Gulf Coast. So that's why it's a little cooler there. And that translates to these kinds of highs: upper 90s Nebraska, low 90s Missouri, upper 90s Omaha, which means low 90s for me in western Iowa. So that's Saturday. Pretty hot. Still in the 100s for the Southwest and for California. And again, these are early afternoon temperatures, California, so probably over 100 for, say, Fresno and Sacramento. And then a little bit better up in the Pacific Northwest, 70s for Portland and Eugene. 80s for the southeast, jumping to the other side of the country. Low 80s for, say, North Carolina, and then some 70s Midwest, 60s Eastern Great Lakes, and into the Northeast. For Sunday, not as hot in the plains. The hottest gets shunted into the southern plains for Oklahoma and parts of Texas and Arkansas, but not as hot, not as much above average, closer to average for, say, the upper Midwest into the Great Lakes. But still hot for the desert Southwest. Those highs on Sunday. Early afternoon temperatures on Sunday, 103 Phoenix, 100 for Fresno, and 100 for, I don't know if that's San Francisco or Oakland, but in that area, the Bay Area. So these are very hot temperatures. Yeah. And that's really the trend as we get into mid-October even. So October 6th through the 10th, our temperatures look to be, our chance of above average temperatures are very high. Let's put it that way, because that's what this map means for most of the country. Near average or equal chances of above or below average for a nice chunk of the east. And then precipitation-wise, dry for most of the country, except for where we may see a tropical system into Florida and the Carolinas. So the southeast has the best chance of above average temperatures. So, thank you for sitting through all this with me, because we really are watching for possible tropical development in the Caribbean, which could move into the Gulf, which could become a tropical storm or even hurricane for somewhere along the southeast coast. Right now, the GFS is showing Florida, but as I've shown you, the GFS this far out is not quite reliable until we see model run after model run consistency, and then we can start having more confidence in that kind of forecast. But just something to keep in mind, and of course we'll be here every day keeping you updated. And then the same thing, and then a few days after that, on the Pacific side, we could have a hurricane moving into Baja California, the Gulf of California, and then the moisture and some wind even moving into Arizona. So those are the things that we're watching. Otherwise, fall is starting out for most of us, the vast majority of us, on the warm and dry side. Now, I do want to throw this in too. Dry is not bad. For a lot of the Corn Belt right now is harvest time. And so we can keep it dry right now. That's fine. And then, as harvest continues in October, yeah, I'm sure we'll see some rain. I'm hoping for snow, but that certainly is not on anybody's radar just yet. We'll keep you posted, of course. And so I do appreciate you. Thank you so much for tuning in. And hopefully we'll see you tomorrow right here on the Weather Mic.